Welcome back to the Seat Time podcast for the July episode. We've done it. We're now on the 7th episode, so just a few more to go to get 12 in for the month. For the July episode, we have Alan Doc Cotton on from 812 Suspension. He has been on before, so if you like what he says, make sure you check out an episode from about a year and a half ago. But today, we talk a lot about finding a balanced bike. So obviously, being a Racetech suspension technician with 812 Suspension, he has a lot of advice, knowledge, and experience when it comes to setting up a bike and tweaking, revalving the suspension. So we dive into all kinds of topics there. As well, towards the end, we jump in on the bike, body, mind, thoughts that I am trying to formulate. I don't know what I want to call those yet, but again, if you've got questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the comments. Find us on any of the platforms to make sure that you reach out and or DM us. The number one way to support Seat Time is to find the share link wherever you're listening or watching this and sending it to your riding buddies. The second best way is make sure you grab one of our Seat Time Stoked shirts from the shop at shop.seattime.co. We're glad you guys are here. We hope you're enjoying getting Seat Time and you enjoy this podcast episode. Doc, welcome back to Seat Time. Dude, I'm so excited to get a chance to, one, talk to you again, but two, dive into bike suspension a little bit. I feel like you're going to blow my wig back with some of your knowledge. But before we go there, how the heck are you doing, man? It's been a while.
Well, thank you for having us. We've been doing well. I haven't been riding as much, just simply tuning suspension. It's wide open throttle in the shop. We like putting people on the podium, and this year we've been pretty good at it.
Yeah, man. The O'Leary brothers look like they're kicking butt too out of that Austin area, man. Look at all the Torx races.
Yeah, it's to have some close friends that give you exceptional feedback, whether I like it or not. Those two are going to give me some feedback. So it's important to have those people in your corner, both positively and negatively. I was built as a soldier. There's no such thing as negative feedback. It's feedback. And with those guys, I was trying to put Sean O'Leary on a spring conversion, and he didn't like it, and probably kept him off the podium in one race because I was really pushing the spring conversion, and he just liked the air at that particular race and the tunability of adjusting a pressure down based on the trail or trail conditions.
So something like that it's that simple for someone like Sean O'Leary, where he is adapted enough to be able to feel potentially that 1 pound PSI difference versus what some of us might have to go change spring rate. For him, that's where he's able to do that, is within the air fork.
Absolutely. For him, our struggle is he's a tall rider, so 6'4", and he stands up. And I don't know if you've ever seen him ride. The beak of his helmet sometimes is over the triple tree, so he is really out front of the bike. And when we went up the spring rate that's required for that, it was just too firm. It didn't give him that initial action that he needed. So, lessons learned. We made a data point off of that. And, in the future, if I have another rider that's a stand-up rider that's 6'4", I won't make that same mistake.
Right. It'll be some, as you said, the data point to go back to. I think I've been working on the concept of a more balanced bike. I did some time working with Cole Kirkpatrick. We made a video, and that was one of the things that I took away. And so I just wanted to ask you, and to start down the conversation of, what is a balanced bike, and how do we find, what is a balanced bike?
So the 2024 KTMs are out, and typically what happens is I will pull that suspension off of the bike. I will dyno the fork. I will dyno the shock. So I know what the parameter of damping characteristics is on the fork. and on the shock. By the way, I really like the 2024 forks. Those are some really good forks. Then I go out and I test with a certain rider in a certain area, and I'm just looking for feedback, what the rider can feel, what they cannot feel. And part of that is knowing the correct spring rate. Part of that is knowing the correct preload that goes on to the fork and the shock. Most of the time, what I'm correcting is, the bikes that come in, hey, I don't like my suspension. Uh, it, it's coming from a different rider. I bought it from him. I'll ask what was the previous rider's height and weight, and they'll explain that to me. And I go, it's oversprung for you. Or sometimes, two guys are in a garage, a 6-pack deep, working on suspension, and they've over preloaded something, and they didn't really realize it. So what we try to strive for is a relaxed preload to give people that initial feel that everyone is looking for, the magic carpet ride.
Right.
And then when we go to a certain area testing, I will let the rider ride in their areas. That way I'm always getting that information from them. I'm keeping that open line of communication with them. I just did an initial bike setup, didn't revalve it, didn't respring it. And then when they go out to test, you know, they'll give me the feedback. We'll just say that they're in the wheelhouse of correctly being sprung.
Right. And when it comes to a rider like myself, or any rider really, trying to find that balanced bike, I guess, what is the feeling that we're looking for? When it was talking with Cole Kirkpatrick, it was understanding that if the rear's too stiff, right, it could lean the bike forward on you. And then there's the opposite of that, where then it could feel like a chopper. But then you could go that maybe the rear feels great and the front is too soft or too stiff. And so then again, you may get that kind of that back and forth feeling. And I kind of wanted to know, like, what kind of conversations have you had with riders when they're trying to explain to you this feeling and you're trying to then dissect what's out of balance?
I kind of set the bar pretty low. You know, once a rider starts saying, "Hey, it's pogoing, it's packing," and giving technical terms, I'll kind of slow them down a little bit and just go directly to that area and go, "Tell me what you're feeling." And I'll typically get out a videotape and then a videotape and I'll slow it down. You know, iPhones are great for that. Slow it down, slow motion. And then what I'm seeing is the bike is packing. All that they feel is that the bike is harsh. And that's what term they said. It feels harsh. It's not that the bike is harsh. It's just the bike was packing. I simply open up the rebound, get the bike able to have a good center of gravity. You know, so when I'm setting up a bike, I'm going to sag and I have them standing up. Most of the time, people are putting these sag numbers on bikes that someone else has told them or they pulled it out of the book. That's where testing comes in. And what we're actually trying to achieve is a good sag number, but what we're trying to achieve is anti-squat, where the bike and the weight bias of the bike is when I'm whacking the throttle, the rear end of the bike isn't scooting down. It's actually propelling forward. That is the first thing. So, you know, once I get that feel or desired feel in the rear end of the bike, then I'll start messing with the rake in the trail and, you know, moving the forks up in the triple tree or down in the triple tree. So that is, you know, really indicative of the genre. Is it supercross? Is it motocross? Is it enduro? And all of these riders are seeking something different, where recently we had a supercross rider accidentally bolt those forks onto his motocross bike, and he's telling me that he can't turn. And I was like, "What do you mean you can't turn?" And then I kind of do a control number on the bottom of these forks, and I was like, "What's the control number on that fork foot?" And he tells me the control number. I was like, "Well, congratulations, you have your supercross forks mounted on your motocross bike." And it's just part of it. Listening to that rider and having the ability to hear what he's describing. And his motocross forks could potentially do that. Maybe if he over torqued the triple tree bolts and there was some kink and bind going on with the front end. It's just listening. What I realized is my ego cannot be in this thing of tuning suspension. I'm never going to be on the back of your bike, go faster, Brian, and do you feel that? No, I'm relying on you to explain, and then demonstrate what it's actually doing. And then the video piece helps out a lot, where this is what I'm feeling and where. And then it just gives me some adjustments that I have in my toolbox to make you more comfortable, which in turn leads the bike to be balanced.
Yeah.
That's what we all want to achieve.
Yeah. I love what you're talking about, though, in the sense when you wick the throttle back, you're not wanting that bike to squat. You're wanting that bike to propel forward. And so that's such an interesting concept, too, because there's this pre-built sag into it for our body and the balance of that. And that's why I'm assuming that each bike from the manufacturer is going to have a different sag because their frame is built a certain way. But then at the same time, too, we're going to weigh different numbers, right? We're going to have different amounts of gear on, and then two, our riding positions are going to be a little bit different. So that's interesting about the sag part. But as you start to work on the front part of the motorcycle, and we're talking about moving the fork tubes up and down in the triple clamp. I've found previously on KTM's, it typically, like, you get it to turn a little bit better if you kind of bring it up a little bit, so more lines showing a little bit more at the top. And on the Sherco, I've got it down a little bit more. Now, again, is that something that's a kind of manufacturer specific, or it's rider specific, discipline specific, feeling specific, right? Like, where are we going to kind of start to go down this rabbit hole of, like, where should my fork tubes be?
Right. That's a great question, and I think based on your experience, I think you got it right. Technical Rudy Rocky single track with that switchback off camber ledgy kind of turns that are 180. The forks are going to be up in the triple tree. I remember X Games, there was a rider, Josh Young, and he sought me out, and he's like, "Hey Doc, I need some help setting up my bike." And what we did is move his forks up in the triple tree 1 inch. And yeah.
That's a crap ton.
So he could now do a foot plant in the rock garden and significantly navigate that difficult obstacle. I just simply brought him over to Taylor Robert and Tadej Blazusiak's bike, and I go, "See what they're doing there?" And he's like, "But how are they jumping? It has no relevance on damping. You're just going to control that in the air. Where they're making up time is in the rock garden." And he went and did well, just based on looking at bike setup. So technical Rudy Rocky single track with a lot of 180 turns, nothing real high speed. The forks are going to be up in the triple tree. And then, something that lends itself more to like a Baja experience. We want to add more rake to the front end of the bike and move the forks down in the triple tree, give it more high speed stability. Also, sand tracks, where there's a lot of sand. We don't want that to snow plow into the sand or kind of dig. We want it to get up on that crust and, have momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I've gone to races where we'll have our riders, the sag has already been set. They already know where the clickers, and I'll go, hey, it's going to be a muddy race. Let's add, 15 pounds to your bike, and it's going to be muddy. We're going to accumulate that amount of mud on the bike. So I'm putting 1 turn worth of preload on the shock spring, and they go out and win the thing. Number one, putting that 1 extra turn on the shock spring allowed more weight transfer to the front of the bike, so they weren't slipping and sliding in the turn. But once they accumulated all that weight, then they weren't, Monster Energy trophy truck slacked out in the rear end. So,
Yeah.
It when the Supercross rider is talking about it, hey, we nailed our setup today. Most of the time, they are talking about the geometry of the bike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's really interesting what you're talking about with essentially having more preload on the rear spring for mud conditions. And I love that because that comes in to understanding your bike, understanding you as a rider, understanding the conditions that you're about to race in, so much so that you can prepare for in this case a muddy condition and a muddy race. And Jordan Ashburn actually on the last episode had talked about that, and it's like duh, like that makes so much sense. But that's it to me, where I'm at in my career, right? In my riding abilities, that's such a fine-tuned, thing that it seems so far beyond my knowledge, right? There's so many other little things that I'm going to be worried about before I'm going to do that. But having a friend like you around, right, and having that knowledge is super helpful.
Well, just riding with Cole, as you'd mentioned before, I remember just pushing my bike up to, start a TSEC race. And he's like, you need to move, your levers down. Look how high your brake, look how high your rear brake is. And this was like, 2011, just at a race, me pushing my bike by him and him helping me out. So that level of experience in bike setup, it's no different than, when I'm setting the sag with a rider, I want them to stand. They don't sit in the same spot every time. So it throws my numbers off. The way that I was taught was the CG of the bike is the pegs, have the rider stand, and, you'll see, these pro racers, even with their arms out, standing to set sag, and, their tech is over there setting sag, verifying sag. Most of the time, I don't ever see them setting sag. They're verifying the number.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They, when, again, the time when I was out with Cole and we made our video, that was one of the things he had me do, was not only were we verifying sag, but he was like, nah, come, let's do this. And we'll stand up. And he was explaining to me, all of the reasons. And then I was like, cool, that's pretty neat. I was like, you're right. I have seen people do that. And then of course, later on during the day, he sends me a bunch of screenshots from whatever race was going on of all of the technicians doing that at Supercross, and everybody standing up on their bike. And it's interesting because it does put you in a more consistent position, to your point, and that's what you guys want, is that consistent number. So
Yeah.
You've mentioned rake and trail a lot, and just
Yep.
because of playing around with mountain biking, I have a concept of what that is. But for those that don't, and then always to deepen my knowledge, explain to everybody what rake and trail is and why and where it can matter, and why in the long run maybe it's not something that they need to go start freaking out about.
Man, that's a whole nother podcast in and of itself. It truly is. I'm going to plug Race Tech. Race Tech has a really good suspension Bible. I've read that thing hundreds of times. And if you turn to 87, page 87, it's going to talk about rake and trail. It's once I go down that rabbit hole, rake and trail, what will happen is we won't even get past page 87, and I know you have a lot more questions to ask.
That's all right. That's all right. So when it comes to that balance bike, though, you're talking about how we were working on the rear end a little bit, getting the preload kind of set up. That sag part. We're talking about some of the things we're doing in the front end. Like what else? Now that you've got the rider out there, maybe they're not knowing how to communicate. They're knowing how to communicate. How does that evolution kind of keep working to get to that balance bike?
Just testing. Right now the 24s are out. They're in the hands of riders, and the team is going out and testing and getting feedback from the rider itself. And it may be very balanced up until they hit a G out scenario, or it may be very balanced until they hit a part of the track that has a lot of acceleration and braking bumps. So the theory is not to piss off the chassis. So
Okay.
we like running a relaxed preload, and that relaxed preload, it gives it the impression that it's absorbing the initial impact at a desired feel and a desired rate. So the first thing that we typically feel is the spring. And then the second thing that we feel is either the base valve or the mid valve. And then the last thing that we feel is, the oil hike or the air gap that's in the fork. So we're looking at all those variables and really tracking and making small changes sometimes, making the small change where the rider is experiencing something negative, and I go over and change something on the bike based on what they've explained to me. Hey, the bike is pogoing, and then I'll slow down the rebound in the fork and the shock, make the bike a little bit more settled. And now I've made the bike pack. Now we're running out of, rebound ability. The bike is packing down, it's run out of travel. And then I'll make a smaller change and then get them forward and back, a little bit more compliant, where they're not being thrown forward and they're not being thrown back, where the bike feels comfortable, it feels balanced, it feels stable. So those are the three things that I specifically look at. How comfortable is the bike? Are they getting arm pump? How balanced is the bike? How well is it turning? Most of the time, there's not a balance issue on the bike. It's turning pretty good. And then I upset the recipe by, over preloading. And now I've put that weight transfer to the front of the tire, and, it's starting to climb out of ruts or knife in. That's where, we're really relying on that rider to give us information, and then closing that information, that feedback loop based on the information that they shared.
Right. Now, the wrench in all of this is that you're not always around, and us riders we're human, so we know we make mistakes. So
Yes.
you that dirt bike, it's got little dials and it's got little things that I want to turn and I want to mess with them because I'm that guy, right? Like So I have to ask, like, what is it that we get wrong about all of the settings that we have? Like, I'm sure you've come back and asked somebody and they've turned things 20 degrees or whatever, all the things. Like, how can we be more effective with the capabilities we have for the dials for our compression and our rebound, and we don't continue to screw up what suspension tuners like yourself have done and set up?
That's a great question. So the first recommendation that I have is to know what your baseline setting is. You know, what is my baseline? That way you're going out riding into an area. What is my baseline settings? 10 on compression, 18 on rebound, 2 on high speed, 10 on low speed compression, and then 12 on rebound. So I've narrowed it down where if you ask me what the baseline setting is for every single bike that I'm setting up, it is those settings. That way I don't have to remember what your baseline is. I already know it.
Right.
It's your job as a rider to know your baseline setting. If you want to make it softer, know to turn that adjuster clockwise. I'm turning the adjuster clockwise and I'm counting the number of clicks. There's 10 clicks there. I want to make it softer, so I'm going to open this thing up to, I tell people, make a bigger change. Make a big change that you can feel. So initial baseline setting is at 10. I tell riders, go to 14. If you want it softer or you think you want it softer, make a big change. Make it something that you can feel. And then what will happen is then you'll have an idea of what the suspension is doing and how it reacts to a particular obstacle. The other piece of the puzzle is, sometimes riders don't know what they don't know. So I'll say, hit that same obstacle over and over again, and then write down, hey, I like hitting this curb in front of my house in first gear. It's got a something similar, that a trail that I've rode, a square edge bump. It's a curb that's in front of a house. And you've opened up the rebound, you've opened up the compression, and you like how that feels. Write that number down. That way, if you're racing or even riding a trail that lends itself to a lot of square edge bumps, you will at least know a compression and rebound direction to go. Sometimes when you're listening to these supercross racers, they'll say, we went the wrong direction. That's what they're referring to. And sometimes the wrong direction is one click at that level. We went the wrong direction and we went too far. And you'll see it. The bike is phenomenal in that 10 pack of whoops. They're faster than everyone else, but the bike isn't turning and the track has 50 turns. And in the rhythm section, it has 5 different rhythm sections, and the bike maybe isn't handling as well as it should through those rhythm sections and the turns. It was handling the whoops extremely well. So I look at the terrain, the condition of the terrain. I also look at, things like the composition of the dirt. Is it sand? Is it hard pack? So yeah, there's technical sections within that trail, but how many extremely technical sections? So sometimes I've missed the mark. I'm setting up a bike too soft, and the rider, having a poor outcome based on the bike being set up too soft. Maybe it was a higher speed track, sometimes, test riding that area before, or they change the track a little bit where there's more high speed sections. And I've been racing the torques here lately,
Right.
and the speeds are a little bit higher, and it just caused me to use a different tool in my toolbox where the trend for TSEC was a softer setting. You know, that's what people wanted. The trend for Torx or TCCRA, Zach Carter has been killing it over there, and you know he's running a pro setting that's extremely firm, more of a GNCC style setting, and you know he's like, man, this is the best stuff that I've ever ridden. But then when you look at a video of him, the bike looks so balanced.
Nice.
Rethink that I valved him incorrectly in the past and just made it too soft.
When you're talking about that, going back from TSEC to Torx, so for those that don't know, TSEC being our local enduro series and Torx being one of the more southern kind of cross-country hare scramble series here in Texas, is that something like when you're going back and forth, you can typically soften up or make stiffer just with our clickers, or is there typically more to it than that?
Depends on how fast it is. We'll just say if you were trying to race a GNCC with an enduro setup, it would be too soft. So I'm going up an additional spring rate sometimes for a GNCC, where the technical Rudy Rocky single track Torx, it's more hare and hound. It reaches those GNCC high speeds, but it also has like the TSEC technical aspects of the trail. It's the best of both worlds without, you know, driving all the way across country and experiencing a GNCC.
I do wish that Torx was a little bit closer to me, that I could make some of the events. Again, I haven't raced one, but just pictures wise, it does look like, again, air quotes, more fun than TCCRA races. And I say that knowing that I make one or two of those a year. So I'm, you know, I'm not the one that they're making it for. So
around it's a great series. They put together a great series, and yeah, you can stay in the Cotton household, man.
there we go. That'll be awesome. I bet me and Liam will come stay with the Cottons.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome here anytime.
Okay, so I think that's been a lot for me to wrap my head around when it comes to suspension. Let's just put it that way, right? Like, because I think with anything, as we start to think about bike setup, it's just all over the place, right? Even when I was going through some of the content that you have on your website, right? Tire pressure can even come in to play, right? And we've got bibs, we've got MOUSSE balls, right? We've got all of these, we got tubeless. Somebody might actually have an actual tube still in their motorcycle these days. There's no idea, right? So if we step back from the idea of like suspension, like when it comes to bike setup, like where does one truly start? Again, to the fact that there's so many areas, like what do you recommend?
So first, correctly spring your bike for your weight in the discipline, the genre that you're riding. Motocross is going to be firmer than enduro. Supercross is going to be firmer than motocross. So trail riding is going to be softer than enduro. So you kind of look at the genre of what the person rides and what is the percentage of them riding. So number one, spring your bike correctly. You did mention the tire pressure. Sometimes, you know, I do have a trackside support rig. I go out to the motocross track. I just go out there with my screwdriver and I help out people like you wouldn't believe. And what I do is I look at their bike, but I'm also putting their bike on the stand. I'm verifying the sag. I'm verifying where the clickers are, and I'm eliminating any kink or bind that's going to be in the front of the bike. So I'm resetting everything, making sure the torque values are correct on the upper and lower triple tree bolts, making sure that the axle pinch bolts are correctly torqued. You know, so that's a free floating axle, and I've pulled, you know, 30, 40 Newton meters off of an axle, and the whole time they're telling me it feels like the front end is kicking. I think the sensation that they were feeling, that axle created a torsion bar. But the number one thing that I see for the motocross guys is tire pressure. You know, especially with an advanced rider, they're doing things on the track that I can't do. I don't know how to do. And they're complaining where, you know, I've stopped work, went to the track and just watched them ride. And, you know, I start basic, dude, I've checked everything. I'm telling you, I've checked everything. And hey, do you always run 50 PSI in your tires? And they're like, what? Dude, my little brother aired up the tires. And, you know, it was that feeling. So I say go back to the basics, go back to the tire pressure, go back to correct spring rate, go out, enjoy the motorcycle and have fun. Give yourself an out. You know, are you going to be sponsored by Red Bull by racing that race? Go out and just have fun and take a step back from your own program. I found that people, even at a high level, when they're racing and competing, if they're having fun, you can't beat that person.
Right. I like having fun. I'm not gonna lie. The last couple enduros that I've done have just been awesome, and I can hear it when I rewatch the footage. Like I'm
Yeah,
just hooting and hollering and screaming and goofing off and stuff like that, and I'm just like, this is the most beautiful thing ever.
it's good to see you
So
healthy. I remember a couple of rounds where you were on a row ahead of me, and it just watching you hold your shoulders like, man, I got to get this thing fixed. I got to get this thing fixed. And I think I watched you for about 6 years having to get that thing fixed. And then after
yep.
you get fixed, all of a sudden you know, you're having fun again.
Yeah, man. And it's like I've and it's just being intentional with my time too. Like in the long run, like to your point, I've got a pain point. I'm gonna take a couple steps back. I'm gonna figure out what's causing it. I'm gonna work on it. I'm gonna be consistent about it. I'm gonna build up a foundation to begin with it, and boom, now I can, kind of keep kicking ass and keep taking names. So it's been a cool growth period for the past couple of years for sure. Um, you've Why is it that mountain bike suspension seems to be air, like majority air when it's like
Yep.
mid-level and up, right? There are still some spring, and that's okay. And some of them are still very high level spring shocks, maybe not so much for the forks.
Right.
But why do we see such a normality, such a normal aspect of suspension and mountain bikes to be air, where we've seen it kind of come in and out within dirt bikes, and it seems like it ebbs and flows a little bit more than it does with the mountain bikes?
Um, I think the reason it's successful with mountain bikes, you know, I was on the exception of mountain bike in the heyday. You know, there's a Diamondback Vertex TA. There's two of them hanging up in my shop, and one of them still has the old Manitou Easton elastomer fork, and I think it made something like a whopping 20 millimeters worth of travel, which was phenomenal at the time. What happens is that growth in just what the mountain bike was, it pushed it to a level where they got some things right and they got some things wrong. The reason that air works on a mountain bike suspension is we're not trying to control sprung mass and unsprung mass. So the bicycle is not, you know, plus 200 pounds. So
Mm,
here's what happens with, we'll just use WP. WP has a quad ring on the air side, and that quad ring creates stiction and friction. That stiction and friction, for those who ride mountain bikes and moto, can feel just sitting on the bike in their garage. Hey, this thing feels sticky. And then when they go out and ride, what happens is it takes more force to initiate travel with air than it does a mechanical spring. So
Mm-hmm.
something that will take, maybe 4 Newton meters of force to get the thing moving, where, the air fork is going to be more like 12 Newton meters to get that thing moving. So that is why there's some riders that like it. There's some riders that love it. Typically the faster riders that are carrying more momentum don't have an issue with their air fork. The lighter riders, uh, I'll use Nicole Bradford. I did a set of suspension for her when AER first came out, and her husband calls me and is like, she doesn't like her suspension. And, she was coming off like a perfect Hare and Hound series. She didn't like her suspension. The only thing that changed really wasn't the setting, it was because it was an air fork. So I went up there with a stealth spring conversion and just like, hey, let me go in the back of my rig and let me make some changes. I didn't tell them that I put a spring conversion in it. And sometimes just doing a placebo, me not changing anything and then making up something in there. For Nicole, she's always been very transparent in what she needs and what she likes versus what she doesn't like. And then she has her pit crew, her husband, recording and capturing this data. So I've got 16 hours worth of data, and this lady is faster than me and faster than you. And
Mm-hmm.
I went out to ride with her the second day with the spring conversion, and I lost her on the trail. I couldn't find her. I just stopped, and her husband Ben came up behind me and just like, well, I think she likes her suspension. What did you do? And I wanted to wait a couple more days till I explained to him what I did, just so I can capture that data. So sometimes an air fork doesn't work for someone that weighs less than 130 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Sometimes it's a female. They don't have the muscle strength and endurance to be flicking that heavy front end around. Uh, for her, I think what was happening is she was going up and riding the high country. So the AER fork was climbing in PSI, and we are starting off at 130 psi, and it was climbing to 155. So by the end of the ride, we're checking her pressure,
Mm.
and she doesn't like it. So I think what happens with the mountain bike, we're more in a controlled environment. Most of the time people are mountain biking, they're not going 800 miles to 14,000 feet and it changing
Right.
pressure drastically. That's
Right.
what that's just the things that I know about the air fork and sensations, what people can feel and what they can't feel. It works for the mountain bike because the platform weighs less.
That's
Uh,
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
the speeds on the motorcycle are faster, so we we have to control that pressure. I see a lot of guys, making mistakes with tuning their fork. They're tuning spring rate. The guy weighs 200 pounds and he's got 125 psi in his fork. It's a problem. I correctly spring him, put 150 psi, and he's like, "What did you do? It's amazing. You revalved it." Nope. I just correctly sprung him. Now that weight bias is correct and it's evenly distributed throughout the backbone of the bike. The fork and the shock are working simultaneously. Where,
Right.
I run in 125 psi, like I said, it's no one needs to be running that kind of a low pressure. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah.
I think it's the weight really, and the speed. Um,
I know we can't. You can never say never, but does it almost seem unreachable, right? That we would one day have, air and air.
Maybe, I think what happens is, Showa sits down at the table with KYB and WP, and they're like, all right, they roll the dice and goes, we're doing air this year. Oh, great. Oh, great. It's our turn. You know, I think that's what's happening where, every manufacturer has had their try it air. And, I have a bike that still has air, and I ride it, and I don't have an issue with it. I like the tunability, so I keep that in my technical bike, where I am able to tune the pressure, and don't have an issue.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a concept, and it's bike body mind, right? So
Yeah.
I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about some of that. So what is something that Mr. Cotton is extremely specific about on his bike setup, or it's just a gotcha or a cool thing that you found that works really well for you?
So the bike, um, I think it's the cockpit, where
Mm-hmm.
I need to have my levers, at that, 45-degree angle that creates, the square, you know, um, and I've always been particular about that, where I need my levers a certain way, and same thing with the brake lever, the controls of the bike. I need that. I
Yeah.
just can't jump on Woody's bike and ride the damn thing. It's
The
just
sure can't.
I can't. It just you know, the handlebars feel funny to me. The ergonomics.
Right. Yeah. I like that. Well, was that before or after Cole told you to move the levers?
It was after I think I just didn't care before. I was just riding a motorcycle. I was the goon that was making all kinds of mistakes, and maybe he felt sorry for me and made the simple on the spot correction, which I did need. And then later on it just envelops what do I like, when you look at Ricky Carmichael, he's got his brake levers, almost flat. But the reason that they're flat is, when he's scrubbing the jump, he's still going back to that square position where it not so much on off road.
That's not really our thing.
No.
If the wheels leave the gown, something may have gone wrong. Like, let's just be honest.
Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to the body, right? You've done a lot of evolving over the years as well. You know, you were a rider for a long time, racer for a long time, doing that as well. Now it sounds like you're a little bit of a technician, but you're still wanting to ride and race as well. What's
Yep.
something that you have found has worked really well for your body to get your body either prepped for a race, something that you've noticed that works really well during a race, or maybe just the way that you like to train?
For the body, hydration is key.
Mm,
So you need sodium, potassium, magnesium, chloride, all of these positively charged cations in your bloodstream. And you need those 72 hours before you ride. So we're talking about cellular hydration.
hmm
Cellular hydration is what I'm talking about. I know a little something about it. I have 4 combat tours in an extremely hot environment, and I would tell soldiers to eat their water.
mm.
And you go, what does that mean? The watermelon, the cantaloupe, the strawberry, the banana, the orange, the apple, eat your water. Typically 72 hours before you're going to inflict pain and suffering on your body. That's why we cramp. That's why we have, you know, poor performance. We wake up in the morning, most of the time in Texas, we're already dehydrated. So proper hydration for my body anyway.
I love that. No, dude, that's so right. What do you use specifically? I have ever since Element has come out, that's been my go-to. I used to use Noon tablets a lot, but I stay away now from. I like to leverage carbs that I choose, not that somebody else chooses for me. So I don't typically buy any supplements now that have added sugar. Um, so I use Element. But what do you use when it comes to your electrolytes?
So I do half and half Pedialyte. So
Mm-hmm.
I take a container of Pedialyte, I pour half in to an empty Pedialyte container, and I fill that up with water, and I drink both of those 72 hours. And you're peeing like a racehorse.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and I know that I'm hydration. I know that I'm hydrated because my urine is clear. Uh, 3 races ago, I didn't have the Pedialyte. I knew it, and I was like, let me let me go see what one of my friends is drinking, and they shared with me some Heed, I think it was called, and
Mm-hmm.
man, I could tell a difference with that supplement as well. And I think you just pick one that you like, the flavor. It's
Mm-hmm.
difficult to drink as much water as we need. Find something you like, stick with it.
Cool. That's good
Yeah,
advice. I like it. Um, in case anybody wants a little bit more about hydration or any of the stuff we just talked about, I do have a nutrition video out on the Seat Time channel. So if you haven't checked that out, just go dig into that. I'll send it to you as well, Doc, so that you
love to
can
see
judge
it.
me accordingly. Yeah, that
Love.
way I can get all your feedback. Okay, mind. And I think that there's something that we're learning so much more. And you hear it lightly talked about in the dirt bike space when it comes to racing dirt bikes. But dude, our mindset is so important. The way we presently show up for what it is we're trying to do, right? And I wanted to know, do you have anything that has worked for you in the past, in the present, or that you might try in the future to kind of make sure that you're there present when you're on the bike?
Um, yeah, absolutely. There is some mental things that you can prepare yourself for in that winning attitude. That winning attitude. Steve Hatch is really pushing into that envelope. Uh, I've taken a bunch of his courses to learn how to ride a dirt bike correctly. And, soldierly speaking, I'm a former drill sergeant. I'm telling soldiers to take the hill, but I've also, prepared them physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, you know, to go take the hill.
Mm-hmm.
Something that happens with motorcycle racers, as soon as you throw your leg over that bike, you're going into battle.
Mm.
You have to have some people into your corner that's saying, uh, you know, hey, you need to focus in on your starts. Hey, you need to work on your whoops. Um, Here's what I tell my riders, and I'm going to give something away. Give yourself a corner trophy. The corner trophy is that championship trophy that sits over there in the corner that you've earned. What happens to me on the motorcycle is I dab once and I feel like I've lost the race. So, what I've done, the former drill sergeant inside of me, is I gave myself a corner trophy just once. And then it lended itself to some positive feedback that I was having on the bike. It led to the next corner trophy. And what I was doing is I was grading myself on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 100%. And I was like, oh, that corner was 80%. Let me focus. Let me scoot a little further up on the seat. Let me modulate the controls. Let me modulate the brake. I was braking traction. And then all of a sudden I got a 90%. And I just built upon that 90% corner trophy. It led to another 90%, 90%. And I was feeling great during the race. That's what needs to happen for the rider and their mental mindset. Give yourself more corner trophies. That way you're not mentally defeated. I do have a 1 minute track that I test riders on. Uh, and you would be surprised that the number of riders that will go into this one corner and tip over the bike and then stop their time. They're walking their bike back over to me, and I show them the time. Hey, we're still keeping track of the time. And then once you realize it only takes about 5 seconds to get your bike back up and started, but it feels like forever.
Mm.
However, that person can't mentally finish that 1 minute track because they've already beat themselves up because those seconds count. Once you realize that it takes 5 seconds to pick your bike back up, to get on it, to start it, and then resume your race, that's the level that we need to be at. That way you have that mental clarity. The moment I see the red mist and you're passing me and I've caught up to you and you made a mistake and we're passing each other back and forth, both of us are losing at that point. I'm inside your head, you're inside my head, and there's my mental game plan being thrown out the window.
Yeah, I love that. Again, on the Jordan Ashburn podcast, we talked about that. And one of the things that I found myself doing is anytime I made a mistake, anytime I crashed, I always called it a Brian moment, right? And I would beat myself up and I would scream at myself either in my helmet, out loud, wherever it was. I would get really pissed off at the stupidest things. And I realized, again, I've gone through a lot, but short story, I realized how much energy I was wasting doing that. Right. And it's like, okay, so now what I've actively the past really all of this year and a little bit of last year, anytime I crash, it's okay, you crashed, get up. But it's an acceptance. It's this acceptance thing that it's just like, because you know what? Shit happens. And you
Right.
can do but now it's already in the past. And all I can do is pick the bike up and keep going. Like if I spend all of that energy trying to just be upset over something that I literally have no control over anymore, that makes absolutely no sense. And it's been cool to feel the difference in the way that I treat those moments now. And like, so it's cool to hear you say that because that's practice. That's technique work, right? It's doing that minute track. And if something goes wrong, like adjusting.
It's discipline. I admire some riders, from the distance, and just watch how poised they are during that mistake, and how they pick their bike up, and how they beat their lever. It's the same way we pick our bike up and the same way we beat our lever back down into the correct position. But they're not like that ice age squirrel trying to get a nut, they're just poised. They've tipped over the bike before, and it shows their experience and level, where I just pull out the iPad and, they're putting on a master class just on how to pick up the bike and fix the lever and resume the race back to the level that they were before the tip over.
I love that, man. Well, those are awesome shares. Before I let you go, I do have to say thank you because some Mr. Wolf balls showed up at my house today. So apparently now you're carrying wolf balls and like we're giving this a go. Like tell us a little bit more about whatever this situation is.
Yeah, so like any other enduro racer, I've struggled with, tire, tubeless, new tech, MOUSSE.
Right.
So when these Mr. Wolf, the MOUSSE balls were developed in Europe, I tried to buy a set and I couldn't find them. Well, now we're a dealer, and I sent you a set. I like what you're doing. I like your podcast. I like listening to them. I like how you interact with people. I like how you set the stage. It's just my way of saying thank you.
Well, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that for sure.
I sent them out to 4 people that I know that will give me the feedback that I'm looking for. I'm excited about them. You can tune the tire pressure a little bit, just based on they have a really good. There's a QR code on the packaging. hit the QR code and you'll see setup. And that
Okay.
setup illustration is pretty user friendly, easy to install. The riders that already have them installed so far, nothing but positive feedback.
That's cool. Yeah, it seems like this is I don't know the cost of a MOUSSE bib for someone to manufacture it, right? I know how much they cost and it's expensive, but to watch people drill them out, I'm just like, "Oh my God, like what are we doing?" Right? So if
Yeah.
this is and I say relatively more affordable way to be able to fine tune that MOUSSE without buying something at almost $200 and drilling it out, like
Yeah,
cool.
it certainly gives us some options, at a reasonable cost point. What was happening to me is I had a lot of failures with, the front and a section of the bib, being blown out, so to speak, and my friends are cutting the tube and installing it and just going, hey, this is what you have to do. And I go, well, thank you for showing me that. I wouldn't have thought of it. So everyone is cut and piecemealed bibs at some point. And,
Yep.
there used to be tire balls. But this particular carcass of that Mr. Wolf moose ball, it seems well thought out. That way you can tune the pressure to a desired feel. If you want to run 8 to 9 psi, you can do that. If you want to run 11 to 12, 13, you can certainly do that. But the cool thing is if you do hit that square edge bump, you're not replacing the entire bib. So for, I think it's $17, you can reorder and they send you a package where it has 3 to 4 balls in it where you're just replacing that damaged one. So you're not replacing the entire component.
Wicked. Well, I look forward to putting them on and having some fun, getting some seat time,
You
and
got,
letting you
you
know
got
what
those
I think
quick,
about them.
man. You
I
got
know,
those
dude.
quick.
Right? They just that's like that. They were like, Woody needs them now. Woody needs them quick.
I like it.
Well, I really appreciate your time. As always, we try to keep this around about an hour, and we're hitting that time frame. So I like to give everybody the chance, though. What did I miss? Is there anything that you just need to get out that I had no clue or didn't ask?
I think part of my success is, I'm a race tech center, and the people that are my safety net is really why I'm so successful. A guy named like uh, a guy by the name of Rob Brown encouraged me. It's like, I think you'd be good at suspension. You already know how to do the math. And I'm like, how is this math going to help me? Well, it turns out suspension is all about math. And he's very successful at what he does. And, just I think what you missed is there's a lot of people behind the scenes that are helping me. People like Wyatt Scott, a race tech technician, Richard Flavors, a race tech technician, Luke Boyk, he runs the pro circuit over there. There's 60 centers nationwide for race tech, and I'm
Right.
connected to every single one of them. So, if I didn't get the setting right, potentially there is somebody within the race tech family that's gotten it right, and we close the feedback loop. Most of these guys that are, just one single shop doing testing, they have one single shop with 2 to 3 riders that they're saying we've developed settings off of it. There's already 25 2024 bikes in the
Right.
database, and I'm not over here doing a wild ass guess on settings. So I just want to say thank you to Race Tech. Paul Thied, he's pretty cool guy. I'll have to organize a podcast with him. I don't know if my mentor Rob would do a podcast. He likes being the guy that sets up, Cody Webb's bike and
Right.
Cooper Abbott's bike, and just being that guy that gets it right first look.
Yeah. Some people like being behind the wrench, not so much behind the camera. It's understandable.
Yeah. For him, it's more like behind the CNC machine.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Making it work. Well, dude,
Yep.
thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your knowledge. And obviously, thank you for sending me some balls. Everybody's got to, it's like, finally, I could say I'm a manned up and I got a pair of balls, right?
Well, let us know the feedback. Thank you for having us on the podcast. I appreciate you invite me.
And there you have it. The July episode of the Seat Time podcast is over. I want to know what you guys thought. Are there other riders? Are there other technicians? Are there other coaches out there that you would like me to try to reach out to? Again, if you know Justin Brayton or Justin Barsha, please help me make that connection. Those are two riders that I really want to have a conversation with for a few different reasons. If you guys enjoyed this, make sure you hit the share button, whether you're watching or listening. Send it to your riding buddies. Please check out the shop at shop.seattime.co if you want to support us financially. Every little bit helps. Thank you very much for being here. We hope you guys enjoy getting seat time. If we don't get a chance to see you on the trail, we will at least see you on the internet. Remember, there's a podcast playlist. We'll see you for the next one. Peace.